Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Eagle Forum's Capitol Hill Report. I'm Tabitha Walter, Eagle Forum's Political Director.
And I'm Kirsten Hassler, the Executive Director. Today we have with us a Supreme Court edition of our Capitol Hill Report. It has been an exciting week watching the U.S. Senate Judiciary hearings on President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. Many people have been watching these proceedings and they have a lot of questions. So we wanted to highlight a few things that we've noticed throughout the week. That's why we've brought with us our Court Watch expert, Dr. Virginia Armstrong. Dr. Armstrong has a PhD in political science and public law. She has taught at various universities and is the president of Blackstone Institute, which her and her husband founded. Thank you so much, Virginia, for being with us today.
Thank you, girls. And you are, please take girls as a compliment. I'm delighted to be here. I think it's so important that we do these kinds of discussions and share them with the public. And I'm honored to have that opportunity. I'm a teacher, and so the whole nation needs teaching just as did my classrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into the hearings. So it's the fourth day of the hearings, which has to be exhausting for everyone involved, especially Amy Coney Barrett. And she has a stamina that I've never seen before. So it's very impressive.
It's one way to put it,
yeah. But she's been questioned on numerous topics. Some have wanted her to answer how she would rule in certain cases, especially when it comes to the Affordable Care Act. Some people know that as Obamacare. And she's being wise in how she answers each question within her role. So Virginia, you've been watching the hearings as well. What are some of the biggest highlights that you think are important for our listeners to understand?
Well, that's a great question, Tabitha, and I've tried to organize this mass of just almost unbelievably sizable and conflicting information. I think that there may, as I think about it, there are four major issues, at least at this very early point, since the hearings aren't even over quite, but they have been recurring, that we've learned a great deal about. And first of all, is what you have just mentioned, and that's the nominee herself. We had with this nominee an extraordinary amount of data already, and the notion that you don't want to get somebody who already has ideas and preconceived notions and so forth on the court is certainly an idea that is it's a very bad idea. And the Supreme Court itself in 2002 decided a case in Minnesota GOP versus White, in which, interestingly, then Associate Justice Scalia wrote the majority opinion. And one of the most important set of points that he made, with which the courts agreed, and that was that, and I'm not going to quote because that would take too much time, but the last thing that we want is somebody who comes to the court with a tabula rasa, a blank mind, because if you have somebody that doesn't even have any ideas about the law, the Constitution, outcomes, or anything else, then that's not the kind of judge who is prepared to deal with the tough issues that will go even beyond their own experience. And so you don't want that. But furthermore, if you get a really qualified judge, it's going to be impossible to find anybody who has a blank mind. And so what you have to be concerned about is, what are the issues about which the nominee has very clear ideas, and how can they support them? I have read I've read a lot in the last few weeks, and one of the things that was most interesting to me was Judge Barrett's dissent in the Cantor case. And I wrote a doctoral dissertation, and I've had to read other kinds of things like that. And her dissent would be of doctoral dissertation level from my viewpoint as a scholar. I am incredibly impressed with the amount of material that she included, with the variety of material, and with the way in which she brought all of that together to make critical points that are, as I say, critical and are not just appropriate, but must be central to a nomination process, which gets me to the nomination. So we learned that Amy Coney Barrett is Well, I have, as court watch chairman, I have been in the office since '98, so I've gone through 5. This is my 6th Supreme Court nomination to watch from the inside and to participate in. And I have never seen a candidate that has the superlative qualifications from the viewpoint of a scholar, but also an ability to articulate that. And you said, Tabitha and Kirsten, just to hold up her stamina. Of course, she has 7 children, so I guess she's got a lot of experience and stamina, but that has been absolutely remarkable. And to remain unflappable, to have that blank notepad to hold up, was one of those fun moments. But I think that as what that also proved, as we listened to the various senators, well, we have in this, remember, we learned a lot more perhaps about the process, which is hidden from the public generally, than we learned about the nominee, who most certainly has not been hidden from the public prior to this hearing. And this is a very fatally flawed process. And as I was listening this morning, and I was listening to both sides, and I heard Booker and I heard Senator Coons, and it was just the same old stuff. And one of my biggest takeaways is, and I don't know how likely it is to happen, but if you don't start talking about it and pushing for it, it will never happen. We need to undergo a major reevaluation of the operation of the Senate Judiciary Committee and make fundamental changes in the way that it proceeds. Now, there are a variety of ways to do that mechanically, but the kinds of things that the Democrats hit on, which the Affordable Care Act, and they camped on that one so much, that should never have been an issue. It shouldn't even have been brought up because it is a legislative policy issue. And in other nomination situations where the Democrats had the upper hand, will say they were the ones who hollered and screamed the most about Republicans asking questions on policy issues. And yet they tried to camp on the ACA. And this is a tactic of the left. They want to, it was emotionalism. This was not an intellectual discussion. It was an attempt to do 2 things: touch the emotions of the American people, especially Hirano, for example, with her, all of her very sad, and they're terrible examples of people who have problems health-wise and so forth. But that is not the appropriate kind of issue to bring up in a judicial nomination hearing for a Supreme Court justice. And so what we saw then was they got off on that. I was struck this morning with a number of comments Senator Coons made, and one of them that just absolutely sends me into orbit in talking about Griswold versus Connecticut as a precedent. And precedent is the anchor of American law. This is where so much of the malicious activity of the courts has come in recent years. Precedent in the sense of court decisions is not the anchor of American law. The United States Constitution is the anchor of American law. And that, again, going back to the nominee, is something that Judge Barrett, both prior to her entry into this process the last few days and throughout the court hearing, kept defending. And if there is any point that we have to understand in this country, it is that. And of course, it's the courts, going back really to the 30s and economic issue cases, who began to steer us away from that. But you can look at legal education long before that, and it was already steering the country away from that. The Constitution is the ultimate precedent. Barrett understands that. The Democrats either don't understand it or don't want to acknowledge it, and the process needs to be redone basically in order to make that point key to the nomination hearings.
Right. So you have the Senate that's made up of politicians, and they have political agenda. So they're partisan. Each person is partisan. They have their own public policy stances. And but that's very different than a Supreme Court justice or a nominee to the Supreme Court who shouldn't have an agenda whatsoever. And so I think you're seeing those two butt heads because they're just different in how they conduct business. But something that they both have in common is that they should be defending the Constitution.
Absolutely, because it is the political versus the judicial and the jurisprudential, the legal philosophy of the country, the worldview. This was a clash of worldviews, and that's another very important point that just overrides everything else. We have never seen. We've got a culture war in this country. We've had it a long time. It's not been given a lot of attention until fairly recently in the public eye, perhaps. But I have never seen, as I look at Ginsburg, who just left, and Barrett, who's coming in, and I can almost see those two women standing there personifying the culture war. Ginsburg, the humanistic worldview, and Barrett, the Judeo-Christian worldview, which includes a view of the Constitution that is absolutely the essential, and that is that the Constitution is supreme. And so that's a critically important, that is one of the most important points of all. I think there's another thing that we need to understand about the court, and I'm really I'm at a loss to understand why we have seen so much of the comment about we'll get a 6-3 court, we'll get a 6-3 court. That would require that we have a 4-4 court, a divided court now. Boy, Barrett's going to push us over to the conservative side. There's nothing in the data when you read the opinions, and there's nothing in the data statistically that supports that. We don't have a strongly conservative court. We've got two conservatives, 3 middle of the roaders, and 3 staunch liberals. And that's not Virginia Armstrong's analysis. That's people a lot smarter and better educated than I, but there is a kind of a gold standard we use with law in the courts. It's called the Martin Quinn scale of judicial ideology, and it measures judges statistically. And when you look at that chart, what you see is just exactly what I said. You got 4 radical liberals, and of course there were 5 before Ginsburg. You've got 3 centrists, Kavanaugh, Roberts, and Gorsuch, and then you've got 2 true conservatives, Alito and Thomas. Now, we can't predict, of course, exactly where Barrett would fall, but if she were to fall as we expect, the most that we would have, which would be better than we have had, would be 3, 3, and 3. But it's pushing the court in the constitutionalist direction, which means a very important political point. There've got to be a couple of more constitutionalist judges of the ilk that it appears Barrett is and will remain. And that gets to the really political, and this is injecting politics, but Trump has to be reelected as president to have any hope for the court with future nominees, and we've got to have a couple of more constitutionalists to get on the court. So that's a fiction that has everything to do with politics, but it's a composition of the court. And if those kinds of things come to pass, then in the long haul, what happens is that the Constitution will be restored to its position of supremacy, rather than, as Phyllis Schlafly herself wrote, we're being dominated by the judicial supremacist. And everything that's against the Judeo-Christian worldview, value-wise, and abortion, what I call the new sexualism, etc., all of those policy areas have been polluted because of initially a court decision. It was 1 or 2 court decisions from the Supreme Court that has sent us down the primrose path in every one of those policy areas.
Well, thank you so much, Virginia. I think this really clears up a lot of confusion about what we've been seeing and hearing throughout these hearings. We are certainly very proud of Judge Amy Coney Barrett's poise and professionalism, and we are so looking forward to a confirmation, and we'll keep you all up to date as the events progress. Thank you again for imparting your knowledge on us. And
thank you.
You can follow all our educational efforts at the Blackstone Institute at blackstoneinstitute.org. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to post them in the comment sections below the Facebook Live post. If you would like to receive our alerts and emails, you can sign up at eagleforum.org. We will see you back here next week on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. See you later.